A lone, blue-skinned specimen sits behind reinforced polyglass. Her sad, kitten-like eyes flicking to every whispering child. Yet, no one truly sees her. Until one night, a life support engineer peers through the glass and discovers a secret that will shatter a galaxy's most guarded lie. What if the exotic alien on display was not only sentient, but tied to humanity's deepest origins? The menagerie wing hummed with the perfect atmospheric stability that had become Jim Praxton's specialty. 23 years on Proxima Station had taught him to sense even the slightest fluctuation in humidity levels, temperature gradients, or molecular ratios. The East Wing's climate-controlled enclosures required particular finesse, each habitat precision-tailored to sustain exotic beings that, according to galactic classification protocols, constituted endangered sentient specimens. That was the official terminology. Anyway, the tourists who pressed their eager faces against the invisible barriers called them aliens. Jim moved mechanically through his maintenance rounds, running practiced fingers across regulation panels, touching each life support console with the detached efficiency of a man who had long ago stopped questioning the ethics of his workplace. The Endangered Sentience exhibit was the crown jewel of Proxima Station's famed collection, the most prestigious galactic menagerie in known space. Not a zoo, administrators insisted, a menagerie. The distinction somehow made the display of conscious beings sound refined, scientific, necessary. Specimen 734 occupied the central chamber of the East Wing. The information plaque beside her enclosure read, Nixarian female, acquired. Post-extinction event, Nixar Prime. Status, sole remaining individual sentience. Classification, semi-sapient mimic, do not attempt communication. Jim had walked past her enclosure precisely 9,182 times in his tenure, never lingering beyond the 37 seconds required to verify atmospheric readings. But he had absorbed impressions. Deep blue skin that glistened under carefully maintained humidity levels. Silver white hair intricately braided in patterns that seemed too deliberate for a semi-sapient being. Fingers so delicate and elongated, they seemed almost musical as they traced incomprehensible symbols in the condensation that gathered on the polyglass barrier. When the crowds were thick, Specimen 734 retreated to the artificial foliage at the back of her enclosure. When the menagerie was nearly empty, as it was during Jim's late evening rounds, she often sat close to the barrier, watching with hollow eyes that reflected a cosmic sadness no semi-sapient mimic should be capable of expressing. "It's not an it, but she looks like a pretty doll," a child had whispered earlier that day, tugging at her mother's sleeve as Jim checked oxygen levels nearby. "Don't personify, sweetie," the mother had replied. "The guide says they just copy human expressions without understanding them." The Nixarian's eyes had flicked toward them, then away, too quickly, too deliberately, for someone merely mimicking intelligence. Senior Engineer Praxton. Humidity levels seem slightly elevated in Section 12, his comm unit buzzed. "Adjust before end of shift." "Acknowledged," Jim replied, his voice as flat and regulated as the station's atmospheric control. Section 12 was Specimen 734's enclosure. That night would have proceeded like the 9,182 nights before, if not for the small malfunction in the humidity regulator behind Specimen 734's chamber. Jim accessed the maintenance alcove, a cramped space behind the habitat's rear wall, where climate control mechanisms hummed with quiet persistence. The service area included a one-way viewing glass, supposedly for monitoring specimen health without disrupting natural behaviors. Most engineers ignored it. Jim knelt to adjust the condensation filters, then paused. Through the one-way glass, he could see the Nixarian clearly. The public viewing area was darkened for night cycle, but her enclosure maintained the gentle blue-tinted illumination of her home world's moon cycle. She wasn't sleeping. Instead, she stood at the front barrier, fingertips dancing across the polylass in deliberate patterns, intricate symbols that appeared, lingered, and were wiped away for new ones. Something about the intentional nature of her movements made Jim hesitate. He rose slowly, moving closer to the viewing glass. The Nyxarian's face was set in concentration, her movements precise. These were not random patterns. They were language, writing, communication. As if sensing his presence, she suddenly turned, looking directly at the maintenance wall, at him, though the glass should have been opaque from her side. For one breathless moment, their eyes locked. Kitten eyes. That was the thought that flashed through Jim's mind. Not the eyes of a semi-sapient mimic, but the eyes of a lost, lonely being with a soul that recognized another. She tilted her head slightly, pressing her palm flat against the barrier, exactly where Jim stood, hidden behind his one-way glass. The back of his neck prickled. Impossible. She couldn't see him. Yet the certainty in her gaze, the direct, knowing connection, left him trembling. A chime signaled the approach of night security drones. The Nyxarian retreated to her sleeping area, but Jim remained frozen, heart hammering with the recognition that everything he'd accepted about Specimen 734, about the entire menagerie, might be fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. That night, sleep eluded Jim. In his Spartan quarters on the station's residential level, he sketched the symbols he'd seen Specimen 734. No. He couldn't think of her as a number anymore. The symbols the Nyxarian woman had traced in the condensation. The patterns shifted in his memory, refusing perfect capture. Yet they tugged at something deep and familiar. They weren't random. They weren't mimicry. They were a deliberate attempt to communicate. He accessed his personal datapad, bypassing the entertainment channels to reach historical linguistics archives. If the symbols were language, they might match something in the database. For hours, he scrolled through ancient Earth scripts, cuneiform, hieroglyphics, linear A and B, oracle bone, finding nothing that matched the flowing patterns she'd drawn. At 3:07 a.m. station time, he found it. Proto-Elamite, one of Earth's earliest writing systems, predating even Sumerian cuneiform. From the cradle of human civilization, Jim stared at the screen, at the uncanny similarity between 5,000-year-old human script and what the supposedly alien Nyxarian had traced in the condensation. "How is this possible?" he whispered to his empty room. The implications were staggering. If Nyxarians used script that mirrored ancient human writing, it suggested contact, or worse, a shared ancestry, that contradicted everything the galactic menagerie claimed about first contact and alien civilizations. Morning found Jim bleary-eyed, but resolute. He moved through his maintenance routine on autopilot, his mind racing with questions. Had other engineers noticed? Did station administration know? Was this why communication attempts were explicitly forbidden? When he reached Section 12, the Nyxarian was waiting. She sat cross-legged near the barrier, her silver-white braids catching the artificial light. As Jim approached the diagnostic panel, he glanced at her. She rose in one fluid motion, moving to the glass directly opposite him, her palm pressed against the barrier. Visitors were sparse this early. No witnesses. Jim hesitated only briefly before placing his palm against the polylass, mirroring her gesture. Her eyes widened slightly, kitten eyes, surprised and hopeful. Jim glanced at the security sensors, then quickly flashed his datapad, showing a snippet of Proto-Elamite characters he'd downloaded from the archives. The Nyxarian gasped, a sound so faint it barely registered through the barrier. She immediately began tracing new symbols with urgent precision. Jim recorded them with his datapad, hidden from security cameras by his body. Later, comparing her symbols to known human protoscripts, the pattern became undeniable. The roots were the same. Somehow, impossibly, humans and Nyxarians shared linguistic origins. They were not separate evolutionary branches, but connected species with a common ancestor. A station-wide bulletin interrupted his analysis. Security notice. Neural pattern detection systems will be installed in all East Wing habitats at 0200 hours tomorrow. This upgrade will enhance specimen welfare by alerting staff to any unauthorized cross-barrier communication attempts. Jim's blood ran cold. Neural pattern detectors would register any attempt at communication, any recognition or response from specimen 734. The window for discovering the truth was closing fast. That night, Jim returned to the East Wing with a makeshift device cobbled together from spare parts in the maintenance bay. A vibration-based speaker designed to transmit sound through polyglass without alerting standard security systems. He slipped through dimly lit corridors, avoiding the predictable patrol patterns of security drones. When he reached the maintenance alcove behind the Nixarian's enclosure, she was already waiting, standing precisely where she would be able to see him if the glass weren't one way. Jim activated his device, pressing it against the viewing panel. "Can you hear me?" he whispered. For a moment, nothing. Then, in accented but perfect standard, "Yes, I hear you." The first confirmed human-Nixarian communication in recorded history happened not in a diplomatic chamber, but in a hidden maintenance alcove on a station that claimed such communication was impossible. "My name is Jim Praxton," he said, heart racing. "I am not specimen 734, she replied, her voice musical despite the vibration distortion. "I am Lanira." "Lanira," Jim repeated, feeling the weight of her true name. "I'm sorry about—" He gestured vaguely at the enclosure, the number designation, the entire dehumanizing structure. "You have questions," Lanira said. "About the symbols. They match ancient human writing, Proto-Elamite, from Earth." Lanira nodded, her blue skin catching the dim light. "In our history, we call it the first script, from before the scattering." "The scattering?" "When the Cedars took our ancestors, yours and mine, and scattered them across the stars." She traced a symbol on her forearm, a flowing mark that matched one Jim had seen in the archives. "This means common cradle. One origin point. One people. Divided." "The Cedars? Those who came before. They shaped many worlds, seeded them with life." Lanira's eyes, those lost kitten eyes, held centuries of knowledge. "Your people forgot. Mine remembered, until they were made to forget." "Made to forget? How?" "Those who run this place," she gestured around her enclosure. "They came to Nixar Prime with ships and promises of protection. When they discovered our ancestral knowledge, they decided it was dangerous. Our entire civilization was reset." Jim's engineering credentials gave him access to basic menagerie intake records. From a maintenance terminal, he bypassed first-level security, searching for specimen 734's acquisition file. In an unprotected administrative folder, he found it. Nixarian female, acquired after controlled extinction. Event note. Subject demonstrates ancestral memory. Persistence. Recommend memory. Suppression. Protocols. Maintain species. Separation preclude knowledge. Contamination. Controlled extinction event. The clinical terminology couldn't disguise the horror. Not rescue. Genocide. Not preservation. Imprisonment. The menagerie wasn't protecting endangered species. It was burying dangerous knowledge. "I'll find a way to get you out," Jim promised through the speaker, his voice tight with anger and determination. "Before the neural detectors go online." Lanira placed her palm against the glass, her eyes burning with the first real hope they'd shown. "Thank you," she whispered. "The resonance between us grows stronger." Jim worked feverishly in the maintenance bay, gathering parts for a modified atmospheric regulator. When activated, it would induce a cascading failure in the North Wing's life support. Nothing dangerous, but enough to trigger alarms and draw security away from the East Wing. He procured a second jumpsuit, one that would help Lanira blend in during their escape. The device was concealed under a maintenance rack, set to activate just before shift change, when staff would be minimal. At 1:30 hours, the North Wing erupted in flashing red lights and warning sirens. Atmospheric anomaly detected. All security personnel report to North Wing Central Hub. Jim moved swiftly through back corridors, his heart hammering against his ribs. Lanira was waiting when he reached the East Wing, standing alert with the few personal items she possessed: a carved stone figurine and a length of woven fabric with intricate patterns that echoed the symbols she'd traced in condensation. Using his engineering override, Jim accessed the maintenance lock on her enclosure. A panel of polyglass slid aside with a soft hiss, the sound of freedom. Lanira stepped through, inhaling deeply, as if the air beyond her prison tasted different. Jim handed her the coveralls. Their fingers brushed, sending an electric current of connection between them. "This way," he whispered, guiding her toward utility tunnels that ran beneath the main corridors. Lanira moved with silent grace, her lost kitten eyes now flashing with fierce determination. They reached the waste reclamation shuttle bay, where automated vessels departed hourly for the outer processing station. If they could stow away on one, they might slip beyond the menagerie's immediate security grid. An alarm blared overhead. "Containment breach. East Wing Section 12, all available personnel respond." Heavy footsteps pounded the corridor behind them. Jim pushed Lanira into a tight maintenance closet, pressing his body against hers in the darkness as security guards rushed past. "Your heartbeat," Lanira whispered, her hand resting lightly over his chest. "It matches mine." In that moment of shared danger and connection, Jim felt memories stir, not his own, but ancient star maps racing behind his eyelids. Visions of ships crossing vast emptiness, of a blue-green world that was both Earth and not Earth. Their lips met in the darkness, a tender, electrifying kiss that forged their bond beyond words. When they parted, Jim saw faint blue markings beginning to manifest on his forearm, echoing the clan symbols on Lanira's skin. "The resonance awakens," she whispered. When the corridor cleared, they slipped aboard a waste reclamation shuttle moments before its departure. Jim hacked the autopilot console while Lanira kept watch. Alarms continued to blare throughout the station as he overrode remote commands, changing their course to the outer processing station where they might find a more capable vessel. The shuttle shuddered violently, menagerie security forces attempting to regain control remotely. Jim typed commands frantically, disabling emergency thrusters, bypassing override protocols. Lanira steadied his hands, her touch intensifying their connection. With each contact, the ancient memories flooded more strongly between them. "I see them," Jim gasped as visions overtook him. Humans and Nixarians living together on a lush, first world, guided by the mysterious cedars, learning, growing, developing the first script together. Lanira saw parallel visions of their ancestral voyages, the purposeful division of one people into two branches, separated by light years, but carrying the same genetic memory. "We need to reach Earth," Lanira said, certainty in her voice. "The Great Pyramid. It holds a cedar node. If we activate it, both our peoples will remember." At the outer processing station, a massive ring structure where waste from dozens of worlds was sorted, they slipped among the multi-species workforce. Using Jim's engineering credentials one last time, they commandeered a private yacht docked in the executive bay. Its owner, a wealthy menagerie benefactor, would not miss it immediately. As they broke free from the station's gravitational field, proximity alarms wailed. Director Threll's flagship, a sleek, faster-than-light vessel, appeared on their sensors, in pursuit. "He knows what we've discovered," Lanira said, her face grim. "He'll stop at nothing to preserve the lie." Jim pushed the yacht's engines beyond safety parameters, plotting a desperate course toward Earth. The journey that should have taken weeks compressed into days as they pushed the stolen vessel to its limits. Behind them, Threll's flagship gained steadily, its superior technology narrowing the gap hour by hour. They descended through Earth's atmosphere, pursued by Threll's ship. Jim maneuvered the yacht in a daring atmospheric dive, outrunning the pursuer by weaving through Egyptian skies at perilous angles. The Great Pyramid loomed before them, its ancient stones bathed in sunlight as they set down on the desert sand. But Threll had anticipated their destination. His flagship touched down moments later, and armed guards spilled out, surrounding the pyramid's base. The imposing Vaxian administrator emerged last, his scaled skin gleaming in Earth's harsh sun, his translator device emitting his cold, precise voice. "Engineer Praxton, Specimen 734. Your unauthorized departure has endangered valuable galactic heritage. Return to custody immediately." Lanira stepped forward, no longer a captive, but a woman reclaiming her heritage. "My name is Lanira of the Silver Lineage, daughter of Nixar Prime, keeper of ancestral memory. You fear what we have discovered." Threll's eyes narrowed. "Your species would never find the node. My many centuries of surveillance reveal you as imposters." "Why have you monitored this place if it holds no power?" Lanira challenged. Jim joined her, the blue markings on his skin now fully manifest, matching patterns that connected him to her, to the ancient, shared ancestry. Together, they approached the bedrock before the pyramid, ignoring the weapons trained on them. "Stop them!" Threll commanded, but his guards hesitated, transfixed by the synchronicity of movement between the human and the Nixarian. Jim and Lanira pressed their joined palms to hidden glyphs embedded in the stone. The markings on their skin flared with brilliant blue light as the sand shifted, revealing a metallic console of clearly non-human origin. With a unified touch, they activated the node. A beam of pure azure energy erupted from the pyramid's apex, shooting skyward. Across the globe, similar columns of light burst from ancient monuments: Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, Easter Island. Sites long attributed to primitive human ingenuity, now revealed as cedar technology, waiting for the children of the First World to reunite. Across Earth, humans everywhere experienced sudden visions, genetic memories of starships, shared culture with Nixarians. The deliberate separation orchestrated by the Cedars for reasons still mysterious. Threll's guards froze, mesmerized by the light, their weapons lowered as ancestral knowledge flooded their consciousness. The false narrative of separate evolution collapsed in a single pulse of truth. 6 months later, crowds gathered at reactivated Cedar nodes worldwide, forming cultural exchanges between humans and freed Nixarian survivors. Hundreds discovered in hidden enclaves throughout the galaxy, preserved by those who suspected the truth but lacked proof. Joint scientific councils formed to unearth other nodes and awaken long-dormant allies scattered across distant worlds. On Proxima Station, the menagerie was dismantled. Former administrators, now repentant, helped reunite hidden Nixarians with their families. Director Threll, humbled by the collapse of his supposed duty, offered his expertise in mending galactic relations, admitting centuries of deliberate suppression in service to a misguided ideology of species separation. Jim and Lanira stood on a hill overlooking the Great Pyramid, now a vibrant research center. Their bond, once a furtive kiss in a maintenance closet, had blossomed into a partnership tasked with writing a new chapter for both species. The blue markings on their skin had stabilized into permanent patterns, visible symbols of the genetic memory they had awakened in themselves and others. "I was never the last of my kind," Lanira reflected. "Only the last to be found." Jim smiled, tracing the shared symbols on his forearm, markings that now resonated with hope rather than sorrow. Below them, a joint human Nixarian starship prepared for launch from Giza's newly constructed platform, bearing the emblem of both peoples, the first script symbol for common cradle. As the ship rose into orbit, Jim murmured, "To remember together is to find our destiny." Across the Cedar nodes worldwide, a chorus of voices, human and Nixarian, rose in celebration, reclaiming a shared heritage older than recorded history, sparked by a moment of connection between a lonely engineer and an alien girl with lost kitten eyes, who was never truly alien at all. But this was only the beginning. The awakened cedar nodes revealed star maps to distant worlds, where other fragments of the original people might still exist, waiting to be remembered. And deeper in the records now accessible through the nodes, tantalizing references to the cedars themselves emerged, not merely advanced benefactors, but perhaps the original ancestors of all humanoid species, scattered deliberately across the cosmos for some greater purpose still to be discovered. Jim and Lanira would lead the first expedition beyond known space, following the resonance that had first sparked between them in a menagerie alcove. Their mission, to find others like themselves, awakening genetic memory across the stars, piecing together the cosmic puzzle of why one people had become many, and what ultimate destiny the Cedars had envisioned for their fragmented children. The lost kitten eyes that had once pleaded for recognition now gazed toward the stars with purpose. The cage had become a cradle of rebirth, and the barrier between what was alien and what was human had dissolved into the truth that there had never truly been a difference at all. Around the Great Pyramid, children of both worlds played together, tracing first script symbols in the sand, their laughter echoing across a desert that had waited 5 millennia for the return of unified voices. Overhead, the stars beckoned, not as distant, alien points of light, but as homes waiting to be remembered. In Jim's quarters, aboard the new exploratory vessel, he kept only 2 personal items: a maintenance badge from Proxima Station, to remind him that truth could be found in the most unlikely places, and a small vial of condensation collected from the polylast barrier of Lanira's former prison, the medium through which she had first reached out to him, defying centuries of enforced separation with nothing but persistence and hope. As their ship prepared for its first, faster-than-light jump, Lanira joined him at the viewport, her fingers intertwining with his. The blue markings on their skin pulsed in synchronicity. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "No," Jim replied, squeezing her hand. "For the first time, I feel like I'm going home." The stars blurred into streaks of light as the ship leaped forward, carrying the reunited children of Earth and Nixar Prime toward a future where no eyes would ever again look out from behind glass with the lost, lonely gaze of a creature displayed like an animal. A future born in the moment when one human truly saw, and could not look away. Director Threll watched their departure from the research center that had replaced his menagerie. The centuries he had spent enforcing separation weighed heavily on his scaled shoulders. In his private quarters that night, he accessed the oldest files in his personal database, records predating even his long tenure as menagerie administrator. A holographic image appeared, a younger Threll standing before a committee of Vaxian elders, receiving his commission. "You understand your duty." The elder's voice echoed from the past. "The Cedar prophecy must never be fulfilled. The children of the First World must remain divided, lest they reclaim the power that was deemed too dangerous for any single species." "I understand," his younger self had replied, but he hadn't understood. Not truly. He had believed the lie that separation was protection, that humans and Nixarians unified would somehow threaten the galactic order. Now, watching the exponential advancements of the reunited species, he saw not danger, but possibility. That night, Threll made a decision. He would join the next expedition, offering his knowledge of other potential fragment species, races whose connection to the common cradle had been deliberately obscured by his own people. Redemption would not come easily, but it would begin with truth. As Jim and Lanira's ship vanished into the depths of space, Earth continued its transformation. The activated cedar nodes became centers of learning, where the recovered genetic memories were studied and shared. Children born after the awakening exhibited enhanced abilities, natural resonance with others, intuitive understanding of cedar technology, and occasional glimpses of ancestral memories without the need for node activation. Proxima Station, once the galaxy's most prestigious menagerie, was rededicated as an embarkation point for reunification missions. The East Wing, where Lanira had been displayed, was preserved as a memorial, a reminder of the cost of forgetting one's heritage and the danger of treating any sentient being as merely an exotic specimen. The polylass barrier of Section 12 remained intact, but now bore an inscription in First Script, translated into all known languages. Through this glass, two worlds became one again. May we never build such barriers between souls. Tourists still pressed their faces to the glass. But now, they came to remember, not to gawk, to touch the place where a lone engineer had seen the truth in a captive's eyes and changed the course of two civilizations. And somewhere, in the vast expanse between stars, Jim and Lanira followed the resonance that had first sparked between them, seeking others who might still gaze out from behind invisible barriers with lost kitten eyes, waiting to be truly seen. The universe, it seemed, was full of scattered children finding their way home to the common cradle. All because one man had paused long enough to look beyond the glass, and one woman had never stopped believing that someone would finally see her. As their ship entered uncharted space, Lanira stood at the command console, her silver-white braids catching the light of unfamiliar stars. Jim joined her, the blue markings on their skin glowing faintly in the dim bridge illumination. "The Cedar records speak of 12 fragments," she said, studying the ancient star charts projected before them. "We are but 2 reunited. 10 more await." Jim nodded, feeling the weight of their mission. "And when all 12 are found?" Lanira's smile held the wisdom of generations preserved in genetic memory. "Then we discover why we were scattered in the first place, and what we might become when whole again." Behind them, a crew of humans and Nixarians worked in perfect harmony, their movements synchronized by shared purpose and the subtle resonance that now connected all children of the First World. The barrier had been broken, the lost had been found, and the future stretched before them like an open sky, no longer divided by glass or fear, or the lie that those who look different must remain forever apart. And it had all begun with a lonely engineer peering through a one-way glass, seeing not an alien specimen, but a soul with lost kitten eyes that mirrored his own.